High-functioning anxiety. This term is all over the internet right now. Today, I want to talk about 3 myths about high-functioning anxiety, help you understand what it really is. And I'll also show you a handful of clips from YouTube videos with information that I really question. So who am I to talk about what high-functioning anxiety is? Just in case you're new to my channel, I was a psychotherapist for 20 years. I am licensed to diagnose. I specialized in working with people who had anxiety and trauma, and I now have a channel which brings worldwide accurate, reliable information, which I also try to focus on solution and what you can actually do to help. So if you do support what I'm doing here, and if you enjoy this video, please do subscribe to the channel, hit that like button. Those are big helps. Okay, let's talk about the myths about high-functioning anxiety. Myth number 1 is that high-functioning anxiety is a diagnosis. So high-functioning anxiety is not an actual diagnosis. It's more of a descriptive term. And as a descriptive term, I do think it's helpful. And next week, I'll be putting out a video with more information about what you can do about high-functioning anxiety. But it's a descriptor. And it's a descriptor that has sort of caught on. And in some ways, I think it is super helpful because a lot of people who are very high functioning, who really think like I'm successful, I'm taking care of everything, so I feel anxious all the time, but it's not a disorder, so I'm not going to get help for it. Yeah, they may just be ignoring the fact that they do actually have a diagnosable disorder and be high functioning. So some of the explanations that I've seen online as to why high functioning anxiety is being used as a term are not accurate. So in the diagnostic manual for psychiatric disorders, there's a criteria on almost every mental disorder that says that the symptoms of that disorder have to either create clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other functioning. So it's an or. So when I would see people, I saw a lot of people with anxiety. I'd say the vast majority of them were high functioning. You can easily be high functioning with a variety of anxiety disorders. So if someone came to me in distress about their anxiety, they qualified for the diagnosis. It did not have to impact their functioning. What does clinically significant distress mean? So I guess that's what's at question here. But if somebody is feeling a significant amount of distress, they're not happy, they can't internally necessarily focus on things, that they're talking to a loved one, they're thinking about work problems, they're distressed about it, that was clinically significant enough for me. If their anxiety is causing insomnia, that's clinically significant distress, and it is actually impacting their functioning, even if they're functioning very well. So I'll show you a little clip here, which is from the Today Show, a very reputable source, and they're interviewing somebody very, very reputable. She is. But she says that high-functioning anxiety is for those people who don't meet an anxiety disorder because they don't have significant impairment.
So the interesting thing is high-functioning anxiety is not a medical disorder, but it has all the symptoms of anxiety, of rumination and worry and concentration difficulties and restlessness, but without the impairment in functioning.
And it's leaving out that whole phrase. You can either have a lot of distress or have impaired functioning. So I'm not sure why people are giving this term that go-around, because honestly, if you qualify for, say, generalized anxiety disorder, and you feel internal stress even though nobody else sees it, you qualify for generalized anxiety disorder. That is the diagnosis. You might also be high functioning, so that is a descriptor. Let me know if this made sense. So I actually wove my myth number 2 into my myth number 1, but I think you'll understand why. So myth number 2 is that high-functioning anxiety is different than anxiety, or a high-functioning anxiety disorder is different than an anxiety disorder. No, if you qualify for an anxiety disorder, you have an anxiety disorder. So the video I'm doing with a little more detail on this next week is going to go through the different anxiety disorders and how they manifest when they're high functioning. So I guess what I want you to take away from this is that if you feel distressed by the amount of anxiety you have, it is worth seeking help. It is worth looking into how can I lower my anxiety? How can I recover from anxiety? And not to dismiss it because you're high functioning. So myth number 3, which is really more about misinformation than a myth, but I think you'll understand that in a minute. But myth number 3 is about what is the root cause of high functioning anxiety, and then also what can you do about it, right? Because what you can do about it is related to the root cause. So in reviewing a number of YouTube videos on this topic, as well as some printed articles, I saw a lot of misinformation about the root cause, or let's just say really not particularly helpful information. So let me quickly talk through a handful of the causes I saw listed as being a root cause of high functioning anxiety. One of them was genetics. Now, genetics might be linked and a cause of many types of anxiety, but there's so much we don't know, and it's so hard to piece out. Just because a parent and a grandparent had anxiety does not mean it's genetic. It could be learned. But also, whether it was learned from a parent or genetic, how is it helpful to know that? I think that if people feel like, oh, this is genetic, then they feel like, well, I just have it. I'm just always going to have it. Nothing's ever going to make it better. And I don't think that's true. I think you can recover from this. So whether that's a cause or not, I don't think it's helpful. I also saw listed being in a very stressful environment. Now, being in a very stressful job and a very stressful environment might cause temporary anxiety, but it's unlikely to cause long-term anxiety of a significant amount. It might be more, what are the reasons that got you into that environment? Why is being in a high-stress environment comfortable for you? So it's not that our environments can't influence us, but they're rarely the deep cause. I saw trauma listed as a cause, and I do believe that trauma as a child or at a certain point in your life can cause anxiety. But again, is that helpful in terms of pointing you to a solution? And then one video said that people with high functioning anxiety have a really hard time relaxing and taking breaks. And then the solution was to take a break. So this is the unfortunate element of YouTube videos and social media for accessing mental health information, right? Which is complicated. It's like everything gets turned into a soundbite, and I don't really see how that helps you. So I'm going to go to what I think will help you. But so much of the advice out there, in fact, that same video talked about insomnia being a symptom often of high functioning anxiety. And then one of the solutions was get enough sleep. Well, if you have insomnia, you can't get enough sleep. You can't take breaks if you can't take breaks, right? So I know people don't always want to hear this, but the root cause of many of these issues is related to your childhood and what role you had within the family system. So people with high functioning anxiety very often had the role of being sort of the competent one in their family. They might have been parentified. They might have needed to provide emotional or physical or even financial help to a parent, or even beyond help, they might have done it for their whole family, or they may have been the emotional caretaker in general, the person with a lot of empathy who felt that it's really kind of like their role to take care of everybody else's emotions, and that carries through the rest of your life, and that can underlie a lot of anxiety because we are powerless over other people's emotions. But if we're trained really young, it is very hard to change that training without directly addressing the fact that you had that training. Other videos say develop good boundaries and say no more often. And yeah, people know this, right? But if you have this kind of deeply ingrained conditioning that your role is to say yes to other people, your role is to make others happy, that lives in the older parts of your brain, the emotional centers of your brain. It's tied to core beliefs you developed as a child, both about yourself and about the world. So a couple of resources for you and a couple of things to point you towards the real solutions. I do have a PDF, it's free, called Transform Your Negative Core Belief, but it really helps you identify What might be that core belief that you developed very young that impedes you now? And then I weave that concept into both of my online courses, one of which is on boundaries. And the reason we don't have good boundaries is not because we don't know that we should say no. It's not because we don't know that we should practice self-care, right? And we know we should get enough sleep. But healthy boundaries are really about the emotional dysregulation that happens when we try to go against these deeply ingrained patterns. And they're about those negative core beliefs that haunt us throughout our lives until we're able to pull them out, look at them, and then heal from them. So really digging deep into these concepts, whether you do it with a program like mine online, or you do it with a therapist, or you delve a little bit deeper into these topics about why can't I change this pattern? How early? These are some questions to ask yourself. How early did I learn this? What kind of stress was I under when I learned that? How much has that formed my experience of the world? And what would happen if I act as if? What would happen if I acted from a different core belief? So if my negative core belief is, I'm not worth anything, I'm not really that important, other people are more important, what if I used a positive core belief, which is, I'm as important as anybody else? Does not need to be, I'm more important than everybody, I'm worth more than everyone. No, I am as worthy as any human being. And even if I don't believe it, if I act as if I move forward in the world as if I believed that, and I behaved as if I believed that, what will change in my environment? What will change in how I feel? What will change, and what positive thing will be reinforced? Because I do believe if you're able to shift that core belief and act from a positive belief, a reasonable positive belief, right? We don't have to go to the extreme. A reasonable positive belief. The positive things will be reinforced, and that's what's going to actually help you change your behavior. All right, I hope this was useful. I'm interested. Let me know. Comment below. Oh, and just to say, last week I put out a video on the New York Times article that said high-functioning anxiety is a hashtag, not a diagnosis. So I just did a little comment video. You might be interested in that because I do think the concept of high-functioning anxiety can be super useful to help you focus on what might make your life happier. Okay, see you next week.